Next, it is my distinct honor and pleasure to welcome my friend, Jeff Broome, back to the podium tonight. This is Jeff's 9th program to the Westerners. He's well-published author on the Plains Indian Wars in Colorado, Kansas, and Nebraska. His 4th book, as Roger mentioned, has just been released, and he'll talk a little bit more about that. Jeff has also researched and written 33 articles, delivered 9 scholarly papers, and has twice been awarded the 6-Shooter Award of the Wild West History Association. Twice he's been honored with the Philip A. Danielson Award from Westerners International. And how many of you can claim to have a day named for you in some city? Well, Jeff did. He was recognized on December 1st of 2012 in Hays, Kansas, where the mayor declared Jeff Broome Day. As most of you know, he is a former sheriff and deputy sheriff of our posse. He's been a member since the 90s and now is retired, living in beautiful downtown Beulah. He got his bachelor's degree from CSU Pueblo, his master's from Baylor, and his PhD from CU in Boulder, all in philosophy. Jeff is tenacious and absolutely thorough in the study of his subject, and I know you'll enjoy his presentation tonight. You'll find it interesting and informative. Please welcome back Dr. Jeff Broome.
Yeah, well, I can hear that applause. Thank you.
Jeff, give me a second. I'm going to mute all, and then I'm going to turn your mic on, okay? Just
okay.
All right, you should be able to go ahead and unmute yourself.
There.
There you go.
Yeah, thank you for that applause. This is, Joe's going to guide me. You all can see me. So I'm going to turn on a PowerPoint in just a minute. But first, I just want to say thanks. And so I'm going to share screen and then get into my PowerPoint. And that's this. And then I'm going to get into slideshow. And I'm going to get into set up slideshow. No, I think we're set. I want to get rid of, oh yeah, we want to record the slideshow. So I guess it's recording.
Yeah, it is recording.
Good. And the media device integrators. All right. Okay. Now, oh, you know what? That's the end of my talks. What's going on? I'm supposed to get back to the beginning, and let me get it home. It won't do it, so I'm going to go all the way up. And somehow, you all can see, there we go. You all can see the PowerPoint, right? And Joe will answer for me on that. So,
yes, Jeff, we can see it.
Okay, I'm going to give some little background real quick. I want to get into what the point of it is, and that's Cody at Summit Springs. But I'm going to give you a little background and a little bit about my books. This was my first book, Doug's Old Justice. It does cover Cody and Summit Springs. It's about Summit Springs. That came out in 2004. I did 2 more books. And the one on the left came out in 2009. The one on the right came out in 2013. And and then this is a new one that just came out, released just days ago by Caxton Press. And it's kind of interesting because the hardcover's on the right and the soft cover's on the left. So if we go back, that's the soft cover. But the right has the full painting. The back of the book, the dust jacket on the right, is what's on the left there. So that just came out. The hardcover came out exactly a week ago. I've already sold almost 75 of them, 500. But there's something to say about it. When I approached Caxton about the book, I said, look, over the years, I've done a lot of roundups for the Denver Westerners, and they've been in a private organization, and I'd like to revise them and bring them up to date. And you might have been on early and heard Roger Hansen saying he checked out one of the chapters, and it's extensively revised from what the roundup was. Now, these two are more recent, so the revisions on them are a little different. You got those recently, and the one on the left is chapter 2 in the book, and the one on the right is chapter 3. The little boy's missing on the right because that's Danny Marble. And then these were the two that won first prize of the Danielson Award. The one on the left is Wild Bill Hickok's Brawl. I know Blaine Berkey is real interested in that, having had a career in Hayes, because that was a July 17th, 1870 brawl. And the one on the right is an Indian captivity in 1865 and concludes in 1866. Those both won first prize. And then here's some other roundups that I did. The Indian massacres in Elbert County are now 2 chapters. The Hungate is chapter 1 and extensively revised, as is chapter 8. And then Custer's, these are pictures. That's why they're all messed up. You know, like I can't get my camera right. So the Custer's first Indian campaign in 1867. I think the first roundup I did is the Kidder Massacre. It's chapter 6 of my new book. And Tom Alderdice's conversation with Libby Custer there is extensively revised, also in chapter 9 in my new book. There's what the dust jacket looks like. You can see the whole painting that way for the hardcover. So I've been doing a lot of research, and it comprises chapter 7. It's kind of the philosophy of history. What historians supposed to do with documents, and how do you analyze them? What do you do when you get opposing documents, contrary documents, contradictory documents, and that? I like Carl Becker, who was both a historian and a philosopher. In 1910, he wrote, "The truth, which alone changes not, is what must be got at. The objective reality must be caught, as it were, and mounted like a specimen for the instruction for future ages." If I've had anything as a goal in my new book, it's that. Now, I'm going to cover this stuff real quick because I want to get into Summit Springs. But some of the causes for the conflict goes back to the Cheyenne history in terms of its confrontation with white people. Goes back, begins around 1640, when they changed their Minnesota dwelling river culture to a nomadic culture. Primarily because of the horse. They adapted the horse and they followed the buffalo. And this is the Cheyenne that we confront at Summit Springs. By 1780, they were living in North Dakota and trading with the white people in the early 1800s affected their culture. Ben's Ford, especially down on the Arkansas River, brought a division of Cheyenne into both the southern and northern branch. The water courses were essential for their survival. And with the coming of the Colorado Gold Rush in the late 1850s, dwindling of these natural resources occurred and caused conflicts that erupted in the war in 1864, resulting in the Sand Creek Massacre on November 29th. That war ends at Summit Springs on July 11th, 1869. This is my nephew did this for me. It's in the book. It shows the Treaty of the Cheyenne. That big one there, can you see, Joe, can you answer me? Can you see my little arrow there? This is the Treaty of Fort Laramie, the Horse Creek Treaty. Look what they had. If we go up to the top of that, that's Casper, Wyoming, roughly. And going all the way down into Nebraska, and all of Colorado is covered in that. There's the Arkansas River down below. So you see they had the Platte and the Arkansas and all of Colorado and about 1/3 of western Kansas. Most of Colorado, the Utes were out at the Continental Divide. And that was what they got in 1851. And then in 1861, the Treaty of Fort Wise narrowed it down to this part, roughly from Kit Carson today down to eastern Colorado on the Arkansas River. That's that little one there. And then the Treaty of the Little Arkansas, we moved away in Kansas, and they got about 4 times the land in the Treaty of Little Arkansas. But then in the Treaty of Medicine Lodge in 1867, they were removed to Indian territory. So you see that the land that we first gave them, now mind you, they had everything through Nebraska, through all of Kansas. They had beaten out the Indians and all that had been there for centuries. And the Utes, all this land here, you find an arrowhead in Colorado that's stone, you've got a Ute arrowhead. And they fought with them and conquered them. And so they claimed Colorado as their own. And so some of the causes for the conflict starts with the Colorado Gold Rush. The water courses that brought them in, all the miners into Denver and all the settlers and all that, just filled up with ranches. And the freighting, it really disrupted the buffalo migration. The natural resources were drained. You had the 1862 Minnesota Sioux War, where they came down in late 1862, and it's reported several times to Governor Evans in 1863 that the Minnesota Sioux were smoking the war pipe with the Cheyenne and the other Lakotas to wipe out everybody in Colorado, Nebraska, Kansas. Conflict was inevitable. And you have to understand that the culture of the Indian was a warring tribe. That was where manhood was made. As I share in chapter 1 of my new book, the Hungate Massacre did not start this war. That was an anomaly. What started the war were those raids on August 7th and 8th in Nebraska on the Little Blue, where these three captives on the left were taken, and then little Danny Marble and Mrs. Morton were taken at the Plum Creek Massacre the next day, 90 miles away on August 8th. These were the four captives that Black Kettle brought into Denver. I found in my research that it's a mistake to think that Black Kettle exchanged for these and brought them in. He was with all of the tribes that had 7 captives, and he released 4. So we had the Camp Weld Conference in late September 28th. That's when that captives picture was taken. And here is Wine Coop, here's Silas Soule. And it is Wine Coop, not Win Coop. Les Craft tries to convince you in his book on him, because I have got all kinds of phonetic spellings and depredation claims, and people who knew him, and they spell the name W-I-N-E-C-O-O-P. And the same way you'll find with Silas Soule, S-O-L-E, S-O-U-L. So it's not Sewell, it's Soul. So anyway, there was an attempt at that. There's another picture that's kind of rare to see of those. And by the way, you got Black Kettle right here that I'm pointing at. You've got White Antelope here to his right or our left. And right over here is Bull Bear, a dog soldier who came in for the treaties, and he was responsible for the raids on August 8th. So they weren't all that friendly Indians there. You had the Sand Creek Massacre, of course, and the death of White Antelope. I just mentioned this because he was, according to Lieutenant Templeton, he was killed in the heaviest of fighting. It says my internet is unstable, so I hope you could get me. Lieutenant Templeton said that White Antelope was killed by Private Hugh Melrose of Company G, and that's Hugh Melrose, a rare photograph. Well, Hugh Melrose married my great-great-aunt in 1865, so I'm kind of related to him. He's not a blood relative. And of course, after Sand Creek, we had the burning of Julesburg and all of the raids on the ranches and all that on the South Platte River in northeastern Colorado, up in Nebraska. Then you had the captives taken in 1865. This lady right here is a white Indian. She was 2 years old when she was captured. It's fascinating if you have that wrap. It's revised a little bit in my new book. And then we started with the Hancock expedition, finding out in 1867, do the Indians want to make peace or do you want to go to war? And it was a failure. And Custer had his first Indian campaign, where he brought the 7th Cavalry into Colorado near Iliff, 350 men, of which 34 deserted in 2 nights. Most desertions Custer had in his entire career in any of his campaigns. And then you had the Medicine Lodge Treaty in 1867, that fall. And then the next summer, the Kansas raids start again, August 10th through 15th along the Saline and Solomon Rivers. Sarah White's taken captive. In October, Anna Morgan's taken captive. In the meantime, in September, you had the Beecher Island fight, which we're in the anniversary of that right now. It went from September 17th to September 25th. Of about 5 of those days were siege. The Indians were around, but not fighting. And 22 of those scouts that were at that fight, of the 51 scouts, came from the Saline Valley, where Susanna was. In fact, her husband and brother were survivors of Beecher Island. And then, of course, they raided again in October, and they got Anna Morgan. And so we got the winter campaign that Custer has his victory and kills Black Kettle on November 27th, almost to the day, 4 years after Sand Creek. That was November 29th. By the way, in every book you read, Black Kettle's killed, and so is his wife. And I've been going through my documents, and I've got documents from the National Archives, 5 reports that says that she survived and was released to George Bent. And Sherman authorizes the release, and Wynkoop starts it. It's never, those documents have never been published. But they're not in my new book because I found them after the book was published. And of course, then you had the rescue. This leads to Summit Springs, because you had the rescue with Custer on the Sweetwater in the Texas Panhandle of Sarah White and Anna Morgan. And that was in mid-March. And then they came up to Fort Hays with the 53, where the 53 captives were already brought, that Custer got at the Washita, of which apparently Black Kettle's wife was one. And one of the dog soldier bands that did not go to the reservation was Tall Bull. He was there when Custer had them all corralled, and he escaped up north. Okay, and where my little arrow is over here is about where the Sweetwater is in the Texas Panhandle. And so Custer goes up to Fort Hays up here, and Tall Bull goes up through Colorado and goes up by Fort Lyon, and then cuts into Kansas. And he gets up here where these X's are, Elephant Rock on Beaver Creek, right near the Nebraska border, and over in the Nebraska border on Spring Creek on May 13th and 16th, and coincidentally ran into General Carr's 5th Cavalry, which was a part of that winter campaign. And they had been ordered to Fort Lyon after that. And from Fort Lyon, they were ordered back to Fort McPherson, which is up in here, where I'm pointing. And
Jeff, you're
just by coincidence,
your pointer's not pointing.
they clashed.
So
What's that?
your pointer's not pointing.
Say that?
Your pointer.
Oh, pointer's not pointing. Okay. Thank you for knowing that. Yeah, you see the X's there where it says Elephant Rock Fight in Spring Creek. And Custer's rescue was right to the left of the map down there in that Texas Panhandle. Says my internet is unstable again. So anyway, there were these 2 fights on May 13th and May 16th. And 25 of Tall Bull's warriors were killed, and about that many wounded in those 2 fights. And there began the retaliatory raid, and you can see he cut back down into Kansas. You can see Lincoln and the Saline River there in about the middle of the map on the right side. And that's where he came in and killed 9 settlers, and of which 2 of them were the children of Susanna Alderdice. One was 5 and one was 2. Susanna's 8-month-old baby was taken. Oh, by the way, at Elephant Rock, we get our first mention of Cody's bravery. This is Carr talking about Scout William Cody, who had been with the detachment since last September, displayed great skill in following it, that is the Indian Trail, and also deserves great credit for his fighting in both those engagements on Spring Creek and Beaver Creek, and his marksmanship being very conspicuous. So these are 5th Cavalry officers with Cody that was taken after Summit Springs. And that's Lucretia. That's the Springfield Allen conversion that he had that fired at 50-70. In the Spring Creek fight, Cody sustained a painful head wound that he bled profusely, and he covered it. He then volunteered to go to Fort Kearny to get supplies because they were all out of supplies. He saved a day for the men, and he was just really impressed everybody. Now this raid in Lincoln County, one of the maps, where you can see the town of Lincoln, which didn't exist then, but that's the Saline River going west. And then as you see going north, where it says Saline River, that's Spillman Creek. And the raid started up high at Spillman Creek, about 10 miles up, where several settlers were killed there of the 9 that were killed. And Maria Weichel and her husband, George, and a family friend were staying with the families up there, and they were checking on their property, and they were armed, and they almost made it to the Saline River before the 2 men ran out of ammunition. And 23-year-old Maria Weichel was captured. She was 3 months pregnant with the only child she ever had. She's part of the talk today on the Summit Springs. So nine people were killed in the Lincoln town limits there, just south of it, near Bullfoot Creek. They killed 2 teenage boys that were 13. Some accounts say they were 14. Susanna's 8-month-old child, Alice, was taken in captivity and was strangled 3 days later in the Indian village. By the way, this is Brent Grandstad, who's killed about 40 miles north of where Susanna was captured 2 days later. But that's the cover of the book. And this is, of course, where Maria was captured, a painting by my artist who does this. The family has that, the Weichel family. And this is Susanna's capture. Her second husband was Tom Alderdice, so the 2-year-old boy was his, and the 8-month-old daughter, Alice, was his. Frank and Alice Alderdice were killed. The 2 older boys, the 5-year-old and the 4-year-old, the 5-year-old was killed. Susanna's first husband was James Alfred Daly. And Willis Daly, the 4.5-year-old, was found alive the next day with 5 arrows in his back. I have a letter written by his daughter saying that, confirming that he had 5 arrow wounds in his back, said, I saw those scars when he would work in the field, and there were 5 of them. Newspaper accounts say he was also shot twice and speared in the left hand. But that's him at his wedding in 1886. And he lived and was found alive the next day. Of course, Susanna, one of the surviving woman that got in the Saline River, I found her statement, and she said that the Indians tortured and abused and then murdered her, Susanna's children. So Susanna certainly thought that all of her children were dead. She was 5 months pregnant with her 5th child, but Willis did leave. Tom Alderdice was away getting supplies in Salina and came back the next day. And this is a map that shows from Lincoln, as you see that, left center or right center, and going up to Harlan and Portis. It's 100 miles. He traced their trail following rivers, raiding Indians, and he found their village. And he went back and he went to Fort Leavenworth, and he wrote a statement out that I found in the National Archives where he described exactly where he followed him and found the village. And so this was then telegraphed. It's part of my talk on Summit Springs, because he wrote a letter to General Schofield at Fort Leavenworth, giving a description of Susanna and saying where the Indians were when he left them. And that's just south of Harlan and Portis, is just south of the Fort McPherson, which is where the 5th Cavalry was. Custer's horses were worn out from that winter campaign and rescuing the captives in March. So the 7th Cavalry was unavailable. So orders were telegraphed to General Carr at Fort McPherson to go south and try to catch these Indians. And he left on June 9th. And as we'll find out when I get into this myths about Summit Springs, it was June, I think it was June 21st when Tom wrote the letter that I found in the National Archives. It was telegraphed to Fort McPherson. And of course, here's Schrevogel's famous painting. It's not historically accurate, but it's a wonderful painting. I love it. And as you know, this is the roundup that you're going to get in the mail in about a week that Dave Emmerich just finished. We've got the color Schrevogel painting. I had a Garlow grant to study and research at the Cody, Wyoming, where this is housed. And the grant pays for the lifetime for any use of anything that I got up there. It's cost $400 to use that painting for publication, and the Garlow grant paid for it. So the decision was made, we'll make it the color of the roundup. This is also chapter 10 in my new book. So this is Summit Springs on July 11th. This is an actual picture of it with teepees superimposed from where metal detecting determined that they were likely laid out. To the left of the picture, at the clouds, at the bottom of the grass, is where the cavalry charged in about a half a mile further up on a hill and came in from the northeast, not the northwest. And unfortunately, Tall Bull was down in his lodge on the far right. And those ravines back there was where Tall Bull was killed. And it's where Susanna was killed near his teepee. The fight was no contest. July 11th, 1869. The military reports say 73 Indian casualties and 52 Indian casualties. And when you read George Bent's accounts of the fight, he talks about the women and children were all killed by the Pawnee. So I think that there were 21 women and children killed, a total of 73 casualties, of which 52 were warriors. 17 women and children were captured. It broke the Dog Soldier Society. Only one soldier had a slight wound. An arrow glanced his ear. 14 horses were killed, 12 by chasing Indians. There were about 500 Indians in the village. So you see with the casualties and the captives that for every one casualty, there were 4 that escaped. And so they ran them for miles to the extent that 12 horses died chasing them. Afterwards, a huge hailstorm came in the village, and a soldier was sitting on a horse, and lightning struck the horse and killed him and scared the bejabbers out of the soldier. He was not hurt. And one Sergeant McGrath's horse was killed in the fight. 84 lodges were captured. 10 tons of property were burned. That was estimated by Carr in his report. It was necessary to make 160 fires. They had 84 fires where the lodges were, and they made, an additional 80 lodges, almost 76, not lodges, but 76 other areas of burning to burn that 10 tons of property. In addition, they filled 6 wagons with stolen property from the Kansas raids. It was a tremendously rich village. Also was recovered in the fight was a finger necklace. And I recently got a book by the Bureau of Ethnology where this is hand painted. And this is from 1880s Bureau of Ethnology 9th annual report of a finger necklace taken at the Dole Knife fight. So one of those like that was also captured at Summit Springs. George White's finger was cut off. A ring. You wonder if that wasn't also used on one of those. Now, truth decay, I call it truth decays. I got into the idea of truth decay in history. So you need to do a little historical dentistry, okay? And our first truth decay, how Carr's command learned that there were women captives. In the 1879 autobiography of Cody's, 10 years after the fight, he reported that when the command came upon abandoned Indian villages as they got closer to the village, they could cover 2 days of travel for every day of the Indians. So as they were getting closer, they were cutting that down until July 11th. And so he reported that the women observed wherever we had encamped, we found the print of a woman's shoe, and we concluded that they had with them some white captive. Now that's the first time that's mentioned in 1879 about a woman's shoe, but it's repeated in the Great Salt Lake Trail in 1898. It's also repeated the next time in 1904 in the Indian Fights and Fighters by a freighter who was actually at Summit Springs, missed the battle, came in with the wagon train that night, but he gives an account of the fight and he mentions it. So that's the first time we have somebody that's not Cody mentioned it in 1904. Cody repeats the myth in his True Tales of the Plains in 1908, and then it's cited everywhere else. Two great scouts, Grinnell, the Fighting Cheyennes, the Roanoke, Pioneer History of Kansas, a guy named Walsh, Making a Buffalo Bill. Don Russell repeats it in Lives and Legends. Colonel Ray Sparks in Reckoning of Summit Springs mentions it. Also in his Kansas City Westerners round up Tobel's captives. They called it the Trail Guide. Richard Weingart, Sound the Charge. In fact, if you read anything on Summit Springs, it's either not mentioned at all or that story is repeated, and it's mostly repeated. Captives, though, were always made to wear Indian clothing. That's Mrs. Morton that was captured on August 8th of 1864 at the Plum Creek Massacre. That's her rescue. That picture's taken, I think, at Fort Laramie, where she was brought. They took them all the time. They got them out of that. The Indians knew that they couldn't wear their women's clothing because it would show that they had captives. And here's Tom Alderdice's letter on June 21st, 1869. That's the original letter. I took a copy of it. That's my picture of it. So that's the picture's not so straight. Where he mentions it, and this is it was transmitted via telegraph. And General Carr says in his report of the fight at Summit Springs that that the telegraph that they had from Mr. Alderdice, the dead woman, matches the description that Tom Alderdice gave, Mr. Alderdice. So here he gives her height and weight and all that in the letter. This is the copy in the Adjutant General's office. This is Tom's actual hand-written copy that I found in the National Archive. I found both of them. And so that was transmitted after June 21st. The command left Fort McPherson on June 9th. How could Carr get and have a description of the wife by him if they were in the field from June 9th? Well, because it came by telegraph after the 21st, probably got there on the 22nd. And Lieutenant Volkmer, who's the itinerary officer, in his journal, he writes on that the resupply wagons left Fort McPherson June 24th. And Volkmer has them arriving in their, down with supplies 5 days later on June 29th. So they brought the telegraph down. There was no seeing women's shoe prints. And furthermore, when you get into the 1883 book by Lieutenant George Price, I think he's Captain Price when he writes that, but he was a lieutenant at Summit Springs. In his 1883 Across the Continent with the 5th Cavalry, he wrote that near the end of the column march to Summit Springs, quote, it had become known that he held as captives 2 white women whom they had captured on the Solomon River, it was the Saline River, about the 1st of June. So it became known because the supply wagons brought down the telegraph that was sent to Fort McPherson. That, by the way, that telegraph is actually in the Carr papers at Carlisle Barracks in Pennsylvania. So we know that it's Tom's letter, and that was telegraphed. So Carr had Tom's letter with him at Summit Springs. He cites it in his report. How could he have this letter in his possession unless it came by those supply wagons connected with Carr 20 days into the expedition? So it's more likely the incident that Price was referring to when the command became aware that the Indians held the female captives. He didn't say there were shoe prints, like Cody said. In his report, Carr said that the dead woman matched the description given to him, which was supplied by Tom Alderdice. This was not delivered to the military until Tom traveled to Fort Leavenworth on June 19th, after he had discovered the location of that village. That occurred 10 days after Carr had already departed Fort McPherson, making it impossible for the command to know that they had white captives until that telegram was telegraphed to Fort McPherson and brought in those supply wagons on June 29th. Truth decay, there were no women's shoe prints. Okay, truth decay number 2, who was awarded medals of honor for actions during the Republican River Expedition? Well, a soldier and a Pawnee. But what was the soldier's name? And which Pawnee? Well, the soldier's name was John Kyle. he had multiple enlistments. That's chapter 11. That's I've revised that for the book. But you see his signatures. You see the J is the same, identical in every one. And he does two Kyles. The K is done one way in the first one, and the bottom one of 1870, and then he does the squiggly on the 1870 and the 1866 Kyle signatures. That's him on all of them. But he was awarded the Medal of Honor as Kyle. And Carr misspelled John Kyle's name as John Kyle. And this is in the National Archives, his for the Medal of Honor, where he spells him as Kyle, which he got from, excuse me, Lieutenant Volkmer. Lieutenant Volkmer writes about the heroic action that he had on July 8th that Kyle had that got him the Medal of Honor, and he spelled his name Kyle. Lieutenant Volkmer was just out of West Point. He wasn't the company commander. Lieb was of Company M. So he didn't know, he misspelled the name Kyle. And then Carr used the itinerary report to write his report, because sometimes he quotes from Volkmer word for word. So he spelled it John Kyle. And then I have all these enlistments and all that, and desertion. Killed by Wild Bill Hickok is actually shot on the night of July 17th, but he dies in 4 days post hospital, July 18th, almost to the days, just 1 week beyond when he got his, 10 days beyond when he got his action for the Medal of Honor in 1869. Wild Bill Hickok killed a Medal of Honor recipient. And his name, notice on the right, you see that John Kyle? That was misspelled. It's been misspelled all these years. I got it changed. They destroyed that marker. They don't give them up to people because they end up being sold. So they won't let anybody get them. I tried to get it donated to a museum. So we got the right name now. It's John Kyle, K-I-L-E. Which Pawnee? Was it Mad Bear or was it Traveling Bear? This is Lieutenant Luther North, and everybody quotes Luther North when they write on Summit Springs. In his report of the battle, General Carr mentioned the man, Traveling Bear, for his bravery, but in some way the name was confused with the name of Mad Bear, who had been wounded in the late night attack on the Republican a week before. Later, Congress had a bronze medal struck for him. The name on the medal was Mad Bear. In other words, Luther North said that was a mistake. It was Traveling Bear who fought so bravely at Summit Springs. Mad Bear wasn't even there because he got wounded the week before. But Carr's whole citation is with the Mad Bear who got wounded. And he gives the date on July 8th. It's not Traveling Bear. But then North goes on to say that, well, let me go back because I don't want to read that yet. North goes on to say that his brother Frank North made sure that that Traveling Bear got the Medal of Honor and not Mad Bear. However, this is the Sergeant Mad Bear. See, look how it's spelled, C-O-R-U-X-T-O, Shodish, okay? This is his report that got him the Medal of Honor. And here it is in the National Archives, the report where he specifically spells him as Mad Bear, Cody Rush. And I found in the National Archives, it's a little hard to read there, but you see the medal, look at the name, it says his X, see the X mark? C-O-R-U-X-T-O-C-O-D-H, Shodish. That's Mad Bear. Mad Bear signed for the Medal of Honor. Luther North created a myth, a truth decay. And truth decay number 3, who did Maria Weichel marry after she recovered? Oh, this gets interesting. By the way, that is her picture taken. We found descendants of her. They're the ones that commissioned those paintings of her capture and stuff. And the first mention is 1876. Washington Smith, his son Chalmers Smith, was one of the Beecher Island scouts. And he was one of the scouts that found the site where, you know, they celebrated every year. But Washington Smith reported in a Kansas newspaper, the Saline Valley Register, on July 4th, 1876, 7 years after that fight, that Maria had visited the settlements where she had been captured. And he said this: the soldier who first reached her in the rescue was the one whose time had about expired, and Mrs. Weichel afterwards became his wife. This is where it starts, 1876. Cody's 1879 autobiography. After her recovery, this is at Fort Sedgwick where she was brought. She stayed for almost a month. She soon married the hospital steward, her former husband having been killed by the Indians. Okay. General Carr repeats the story in 1887, actually writing to that same Washington Smith a letter. He gave the first account of Maria's remarriage, saying that after rescue, she was taken to Fort Sedgwick. This is Carr in the letter to Washington Smith, quote, where she was placed in the hospital and cured, and afterwards, as I was told, married an infantry soldier. Oh. In Carr's unpublished memoirs, later organized by his wife, Mary, he adds the soldier was an hospital attendant. In 1908, Elizabeth Barr, in her book, Souvenir History of Kansas, on page 42, said, it's not definitely known at this time whether it was a soldier she married, a blacksmith, or an army surgeon. 1910, Christian Bernhardt's book, Indian Raids in Lincoln County, on page 46, notes that Maria, quote, again remarried and is supposed to live on a farm in eastern Kansas. He wrote that in 1910. She died in 1890. Adolf Roenick wrote in 1933 that Maria, quote, was married to a blacksmith in one of the companies whose name was Kyle. Well, we get Kyle here again. From that time on, all authors writing on Summit Springs acknowledge one of these accounts. By the way, Roenick's Pioneer History of Kansas, he ended up being in Lincoln, Kansas, and he made saddles. And I'm looking across from my computer right here. I have one of his saddles from 1900. I got it in Kansas a few months ago. Well, it appeared that none of that was true. We learned that she married a man named John Mance, who has no military service, in 1875. That's the marriage license that my good friend Mike Day, who's my researcher for me on genealogy stuff, found in Omaha. So she was married to John Mance in 1875. She had no children with him. Here's the Mance, when you can see the Mance and Mary Weichel. Here's the 1880 census, and that little black part on the left, right above it, is John Mance. You see that 2 lines above? And then that dark line, that's Mary, wife on the right. And look at down there, right below that, Weichel, W-E-I-C-H-E-L-L, Minnie, age 10, stepdaughter. So that's definitely Maria Weichel, okay? And that's Minnie Grace Weichel. She died in 1945, almost to the day when her mother would have been 100 had she lived. She was 5 months in the womb of Maria Weichel when Maria was shot in the back and survived at Summit Springs. Maria, though, stayed married to Mance until her death in 1890. We have the obituary from the San Francisco Morning Call on September 23rd. That's today, by the way. Noting that she was 45 years, 2 months, and 2 days, which would make her birthday July 18th, 1845. She turned 24 just 6 days after her rescue at Summit Springs at Fort Sedgwick. It thus appears that Maria's marriage had no connection to a man connected with her recovery. Oh, not so fast. What about before 1875? A little more research shows that she married a J. Walsh in 1870. Records show that she married a 1870 marriage to Joseph Walsh. Look at that, W-A-L-C-H. This was likely John Walsh. I've got the I've got the muster rolls of the 5th Cavalry for Summit Springs, and there was a John Walsh whose enlistment expired in 1872, but it did not last long because she remarried again in 1875. In the National Archives, though, in my research, look what I found. John M. Walsh, Private, Company D, 5th Cavalry. On July 30th, 1869, Maria is still in Fort Sedgwick Hospital. Request to be appointed hospital steward. That request near Fort Sedgwick. This request was made while Maria was still there. So yes, there is a connection to a hospital steward who fought at Summit Springs and could have been one of the first soldiers to find her. We don't know, John Walsh. But she marries a Joseph, W-A-L-C-H. Are they the same? Here's the marriage certificate. This be John Walsh. Maria couldn't speak any English. She came into, she arrived in America in New York in May 2nd. She was captured, May 10th, excuse me, in New York from Germany. May 10th, she was captured 30th. She was only in America for 20 days. The time it took to get out there was five days. She was only in Kansas for 15 days before she was captured. Couldn't speak a lick of English. And if you notice this marriage certificate, it's a little hard to read, but it says Joseph Walsh. It's all written by the same person. And if the person's German with a thick German accent, you could easily confuse John with Joe Walsh, John Walsh, Joseph Walsh, John Walsh in the German accent. I think that she did marry him. I don't know what happened. More research has to be done at the archives. Truth decay number 4, who killed Tallbull? There are 5 possibilities. In my judgment, the 5 are listed in the order in which they're more probably true. Sergeant Danny McGrath. He's the one that had his horse killed right there at the ravines where Tallbull was killed. Buffalo Bill Cody is number 2. And unknown Pawnee is number 3. George Mason, number 4. Frank North, number 5. And when you read all the books about Summit Springs, and the most recent one is Lewis Craft's book on Sand Creek, it's Frank North who kills him. And that's the one that I can guarantee you he did not kill Tallbull. In 1928, Grinnell was Cody in the fight. Let's see if there's 2 issues. First, was Cody in the fight? And if so, did he kill Tallbull? 1928, Grinnell said he wasn't in his 2 great scouts. And there's the quotation there that you can read. Said, just at this terrific hailstorm hit right at dark, and everybody trying to get into shelter, Cody rode into camp. He had been with Colonel Royal and missed the fight. Later, Ned Buntline, who made Cody famous, he was given credit for having killed Tallbull, but he was not in the fight at all. So you see, Cody couldn't have done it because he missed the whole fight. Oh, well, let's go back to the New York Herald, July 28, 1869, from an unidentified officer at the fight. The first account that makes the national news about Summit Springs on July 11th, 1:00 p.m. The chief scout, Mr. William Cody, remember he was only known to the 5th Cavalry then. Steve, I know you love this. Steve Friesen, came dashing up hatless, reporting that he had come upon their camp about 8 miles to the left and near the Platte River. Wow. At this time in Cody's career, he was only known to those officers who he was assigned to. Additional confirmation comes from Carr's unpublished memoirs, as well as Price's 1883 across the continent with the 5th Cavalry, when Price wrote that Cody arrived with news that a large herd of ponies had been discovered 6 miles distant in a southwesterly direction. They found the horse herd, and then they found the village from that. This is also first-hand evidence that Cody had discovered the village. Now, who killed Tallbull? Luther North lived a long life. By the way, he was born the same year as Cody. He died in 1933. Cody died in 1917. And this myth of Cody missing the fight and Cody having nothing to do with killing Tallbull is perpetuated by Luther North. He gave 10 separate accounts stating that his brother Frank North killed Tallbull, starting with Grinnell in 1889 in 2 Great Scouts, and in 1928, and given Pawnee folk tales in 1889, and given Grinnell's reputation for accurate history of the Cheyenne, many historians continue to say Frank North killed Tallbull. But this claim goes against all earlier accounts, all of which identify others and not North. In fact, if you read Don Russell's The Lives and Legends of Buffalo Bill, he goes through all of that. He shows it can't be Frank North that killed him. And you should know also that Frank North suffered debilitating injuries, which eventually killed him in a Wild West show with Buffalo Bills, and I think it was 1885, and he died from the injuries of that. And I think Luther North had anger in his brother dying in Cody's show, and I think he had some jealousy for Cody's fame too. So who did kill Tallbull then? I can tell you it wasn't Frank North. Lieutenant George Mason was credited in 1904 with killing Tallbull by a teamster in Brady's Indian Fights and Fighters, page 177. Carr, in separate accounts, credits Cody, credits an unknown Pawnee, and more importantly, credits Daniel McGrath in a letter found in McGrath's pension file that Carr wrote. In Cody's own account of killing Tallbull, it's very interesting. He mentions 2 people, Lieutenant Mason and Danny McGrath. Cody says Mason got Tallbull's war bonnet and McGrath got Tallbull's horse. In Carr's official report of the battle, he said, Tallbull killed his horse after determined to die fighting. So apparently nobody got Tallbull's horse. And again, there were lots of chiefs there. You understand that, wearing their chief stuff and all that, and nobody knew who Tall Bull was. That became later, you know, when they found the letters. They found Tall Bull's letters written by Wine Coop and others saying that he's a friendly Indian and stuff. And if you find him, feed him. Who killed Tall Bull? Can anything be concluded? Well, an unpublished memoir that's in the Minnesota State Historical Society breaks it down in an interesting way, mentioning Cody, Mason, and McGrath as the three who might have killed Tall Bull, and concludes that the soldiers present believed it was Danny McGrath. But this detailed account is excellent because it shares some things. This is what he wrote. Buffalo Bill claims to be the man who killed Tall Bull. So also did Lieutenant Mason and Middle Quartermaster, but neither one is entitled to the claim. Now, let me tell you that Mason dies within a year in Cheyenne in a barroom brawl. Tall Bull was killed by Sergeant Danny McGrath, Company H, 5th Cavalry. Now look at this. Cody was all of 300 yards from where Tall Bull fell. It is true that this is not an extraordinary range for such an expert shot as he, but when men were galloping through a line of fire as these men were, it is almost impossible. Lieutenant Mason was only about half the distance from Bull than Cody was, but was armed with a revolver. So it seems to me that it was rather preposterous for him to make the claim, notwithstanding the fact he was an expert pistol shot. My experience in pistol shooting is that when mounted and going on the dead jump, it is necessary to burn your opponent with your powder to get him. Still, a lucky shot might get a fellow even at long range. Now, McGrath's horse was shot and he was on foot at a distance of less than 50 yards. He deliberately kneeled on one knee, took careful aim, and fired and shot Tall Bull through the heart. Now, that's eyewitness accounts from the soldiers that were there, although this guy enlisted after it, but he spent 35 years in the 5th Cavalry. He heard it all. And they all believed Danny McGrath. And Carr said Danny McGrath killed Tall Bull. So I think Danny McGrath probably did it. I think Cody might have, and maybe an unidentified Pawnee. Truth Decay number 5, Cody's actions in 1869 was great. What kind of a person was Cody then? From our Colorado magazine, there's an interesting memoir of I misspelled soldier, Luke Cahill. He writes in there, this was when they went down on the Washita campaign that Custer had, you know, his fight on November 27th, 1868. The 5th Cavalry was traveling down there too. And they got down in New Mexico and Texas and over there. And they had 300 cattle that they took to feed the soldiers. But the command got caught in a blizzard and all the cattle were lost and froze to death. Cody volunteered to take 20 wagons and a handful of soldiers and hunt buffalo to keep, this is in freezing weather. He had 3 successful hunts. This Cahill was a sergeant in charge of the infantry that drove the wagons. So he was there with Cody and he wrote about it. And he said these 3 successful hunts, the first one he killed 55 buffalo. The second one killed 41. And the third one was an untold number. Cahill had charge of the soldiers and he remembered well his impressions of Cody. And look what he says. Cody never shot an animal but once and not one of the buffalo escaped. He had to shoot a buffalo in the lung. It was right above their hump, between their hump and their front legs. You get them right there, just below the neck. You get them in the lungs. And they can't run. And they, you shoot them in the heart, they can run for a few miles, and they'll scare all the other buffalo. When you shoot them in the lungs, they drop on their front legs, drop down, and they cough and they can't breathe. And the other cows come around and, oh, what's up with you? What's going on? You know, they don't know what's going on. You can shoot them and shoot them and shoot them. But if you don't get them right where that needs to be, you'll chase them all away. Cody never shot an animal but once, and not one of the buffalo escaped. In one of the hunts, Cody, quote, completely exhausted his 2 fine horses. Mind you, he's shooting from a horse. And he himself very badly jarred from the recoil of his heavy Springfield rifle. I have the identical rifle. Although I have the last conversion, the 1870 conversion. He had the 1868. And I fired it 15 times, and I had a yellow bruise that stayed on me for 10 days. And look what he did. Cahill was so impressed with Cody's conduct that he recalled the world only had one Buffalo Bill and it will never have another. So anyway, those are the truth decays. Cody was the real deal. And so anyway, I go through those in the roundup. And so if you want to get my new book, this is my last slide. You can get it on Caxton Press and then mail it to you. But you can get a signed copy from me. There's my email address. I got 2 J's at the front because I'm James Jefferson, and I got an E after Broome. So jjeffersonbroome at comcast.net. $30 covers postage for soft cover. $40 covers postage for hardcover. Send a check down to Post Office Box 252, Viola, Colorado. And I'm going to leave this. So Joe, can you help me on that?
Yeah.
Let's see. Yeah.
I am going to unmute everybody.
Yeah.
So
And get me back.
so they can,
Oh, I could put stop.
yeah.
Oh, wait. Yeah. Stop share. Yeah, I'm sharing screen. Stop share. There. Now I'm back. I see you.
Okay. Let me do something. I'm lost too, but give me a sec. So there's a chat line there if you want to type in a question, or you can unmute your own mic and ask Jeff a question if you have a question.
You have them?
Is my picture showing?
Yes.
Okay, good.
We can see you.
Okay.
So,
Well, I can weigh in. Steve Friesen here. Here, start video.
All right.
Anyway, thank you.
Hi, Steve.
Thank you for all the good words about Buffalo Bill, Jeff. It looks like it's getting dark here in my room. Anyway, darkness is rolling in. But at any rate, thank you for all of that. And you had mentioned that about the Norths. It's very interesting because Frank and Buffalo Bill were really pretty close. Luther,
Yes.
I think, was kind of off to the side there. And I think it was a little bit after Frank died that I think Luther found Frank as a way of maybe promoting himself. You know, there was
Yes.
some sour grapes and stuff, but Frank was really the more outstanding. But Frank was so, he did not put himself out there. He was perfectly fine with Buffalo Bill getting all the accolades, whether it be in the show or perhaps in the earlier stuff.
Jealousy. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I appreciate what you said there.
Yeah, and now, you know, I did this real quick, but you'll see when you get your roundup that I'm very articulate in laying this out and give all the evidence on it. So I just, I think it's definitive that Luther North did not kill Talbot. And it's questionable if Danny McGrath or Cody or Pawnee killed him. But
Yeah,
but if,
you meant Frank North, you meant, did not.
yeah,
kill.
Frank North, yeah. Excuse me, yeah. And, but yeah, by the way, I don't know if any of you know Kansas, but the big car dealership, Ford and Chevrolet and all that in Salina, Kansas, is owned by the MacArthurs. It's in its second generation. And the wife is a descendant of a first cousin of the Norths. And she had all sorts of North letters and stuff. And so when she had the 2 boys that run that dealership, MacArthur Ford in Salina, their names are North and West. The older boy was named North for the North brothers. And then when she had a second one, she said, just named him West to be funny.
Northwest.
So, anyway. They're the one. I have a picture of Luther North that's never been published except in my publications, and it's in my book.
So Jeff, the story of Cody shooting Tall Bull and then getting on his horse and riding into the village, not realizing that he had killed Tall Bull until Tall Bull's wife started wailing when she saw the horse.
That's the story. Is one of the wives? There are different accounts because Tall Bull in one account gives the wife and daughter and puts them on a horse and tells them go to the officers and you'll be okay. And then he went and determined to die. So she had the horse. Now that's one account that comes from the Indian side. But Carr says that Tallbull's horse was killed and in that fight. And then you have the account later that comes out that when they were in their camp, I think it's the first night, and the wife recognizes her husband's horse. Now, I, as a historian, I don't want to discount things if I can find an interpretation to make them all true.
Right.
All right. Indians had more than one horse. They had a favorite. So
Right.
It could be that the favorite horse is what Cody was riding and wasn't killed that Carr reported on. So it's possible these all accounts could still have truth to them. I wouldn't necessarily discount it because that is a firsthand account. You know, like Custer had two horses at the Little Bighorn and one was lost and Dandy was sent home. So Tallbull could be the same way. So I wouldn't necessarily say that's false.
Well, in performing, it makes it a great story. So, so I'll still use it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you wouldn't be off on that. But if you get some questions,
Yes.
you read my book or something, it says afterwards.
Yeah. Well, I will definitely tell the truth if
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I think that one of his horses could have been killed in the fight.
Right.
Carr's right. And Cody was riding a white horse, I think it was, that was identified by one of the wives as being Tallbull's. So, and this wife was on another horse too. You realize there's three
Maybe he
horses.
had three.
Yeah, yeah.
Multiple horses and multiple wives. I see no trouble here.
That's kind of.
And they're not Mormon and they're not Muslim.
No, I see lots of trouble here.
My wife, speaking of wives, Montley wants me to ask, she has reason to wonder if Concordia, Kansas is connected with this story or not.
Well, Concordia, Kansas, Concordia, Kansas is about 15 miles east of where Sarah White was captured. So, excuse me, it was there then, but the Indians didn't get into Concordia. They were about 16 miles to the west. So, yeah.
Jeff, would that be Jamestown now?
Yeah, Jamestown, yeah. Actually, yeah, because if you know that area, you know that Jamestown is about 18 miles or so to the west of Concordia. And Sarah White was captured about 2 miles east of Jamestown. So,
well, if we get into the tale telling, Montley's going to find a way to connect her family line to what you have just told us about.
Hey, let me tell you a story. You'll like this, Montley. After I wrote Dog Soldier Justice and the University of Nebraska picked it up, I got an email from Nebraska saying that a man wants to contact me and is it all right? And well, the man was the son of Dan LeMay. Does anybody know who Dan LeMay is? Dan LeMay wrote the novel The Searchers that John Wayne did in 1956. And, you know, that's considered John Wayne's best film. That's his favorite to himself. And this LeMay emails me. He's in his 80s now, but we still stay in contact. And he said, I've always been trying to understand how my dad got the story that is in The Searchers, because everybody thinks it's Cynthia Ann Parker. And he said, I never believed that because my dad came out in the Swedish colony into Concordia after the Indian raids and all that. But when he was born, his grandmother, his mother, I think, was 8 years old during those raids. And she came out with Nels Nelson, and who brought a colony, a bunch of Swedes out. and they settled in the Concordia area in Jamestown and all that. And I have Nels Nelson's depredation claim, and it's in the Dog Soldier Justice. So the LeMay, Dan LeMay, he wrote me and he said, "You've solved the mystery. I know that my dad grew up hearing the stories of the Indian raids from my grandmother." And so he fictionalized these raids that became, he wrote this, the son wrote a book on it, In Search of the author of The Searchers. And so he cites Dog Soldier Justice in there. And he sent me a signed copy when the book came out. So there's a Concordia connection. The Searchers came from the raids of 1868 when LeMay's, I think it was LeMay's grandmother was 8 years old. And when he grew up there, he heard those stories. He was fascinated by it. So he becomes a Hollywood writer. And so there's the connection with Concordia.
So my people were in Concordia at that time.
Oh, then they were probably, you got blonde hair, they were with that colony.
No, actually they were, no, it was English, but Scandia was a Scandinavian
Scandia,
town.
yeah, I'm speaking there. I'm going there in 2 weeks.
Oh.
Belleville. Yeah, I'm staying in Scandia.
Belleville, oh.
By the way, the front and cover of the book, that boy gets killed in the Republican River right at Scandia. That's that 17-year-old Malcolm Grandstadt who was killed on, that's the front cover of the book.
I just did some research in Mankato because that's the county seat,
yeah,
Jewel
I
County.
spoke there. Yeah, I'm speaking in Belleville, I'm speaking in Blue Rapids, I'm speaking in Lincoln, I'm speaking in Minneapolis, in Oakley, in a couple weeks, going out there. So, yeah. So,
Jeff,
what was there?
Jeff, you want to mention you're going to be on KOA also?
Oh yeah, Mike Rosen emailed me yesterday, and he's got my book, and he's going to have me on. He's filling in for Mandy, and he's scheduled me for I think it's October. Let me look at it. I just wrote it down. October 15th at 2 p.m. Yeah, so I'll be on KOA with Mike. That'll be fun.
And there's a comment on the chat line from Reed about your research. So you're kind of.
Yeah. You want to read it?
It says great research, Jeff.
Oh, that's one of my relatives. One of my sons. Thank you. By the way, I will tell you this, couple things. After I got this book proposal for Indian Raids and Massacres, the subtitle is Essays on the Central Plains Indian War. I started reworking all of my old Denver Western roundups and some other publications too, and put them in a chronological flow. And there's an introduction to each chapter, which connects everything. But each chapter can also be read in any order by itself. And it dawned on me, I think some of my close Denver Westerners friends in the acknowledgements, but it dawned on me after the book was done that had the Denver Westerners not offered me the roundup as a means to do my research, this book wouldn't have been written. So it really is a tribute to the Denver Westerners. There's one Westerner, and I won't mention his name, he's not listening tonight. He tried to steer me away from writing for the roundup because he said I need to get out in Montana in the West and Kansas history and Nebraska history, so write these things for those. Well, I checked on those, and they had word links that was like 1/3 what I could do with a roundup. And so the Denver Westerners allowed me to do my research, let's put it that way. So this book is really a book in tribute to the Denver Westerners.
So Jeff, we have another request on how to purchase the purchase information.
Uh-huh.
Can you repeat that so people?
Yeah, repeat it. If you don't get the address down right or something, but you can email me and I'll give you this. And my email address is the initial J and then Jefferson and then Broome, Broome, at Comcast.net. okay? But you could send me a check, as I said, $30 for the soft cover, $40 for the hard cover, whichever you want. If you want more than one, if you're thinking like Christmas or something, I don't charge, it's just $5. I sent 5 books out today to general card descendants, to one household. And they just paid $5 postage. So, and you would send that to my name, Post Office Box 252. And that's Beulah, Colorado. And it's 81023.
Here, are there any further questions for Jeff? Well, Jeff, we thank you. It is great to hear the story, and we look forward to reading your book, and we are blessed that you were able to join us tonight, and I think everybody enjoyed your presentation.
Well, thank you, Captain Bob.